But I think we both know what men are like.
Just about opened up Envisioning 2001, Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey, which you have all seen already, or yes, I imagine you would have all seen it, which is fantastic. It's a day that we've been working towards for a long time. If you see it, you may already know, but I'll give you a little overview that it's an exhibition that originated at the Deutsches Filminstitut Filmmuseum in Frankfurt, and was adapted for our space, and we've had sort of a marvelous time thinking through the exhibition and working with the great folks at the DFF and everyone involved with the Kubrick estate, and sort of bringing the story of the making of 2001 to life. So you've all seen it. You are obviously fans of the film, and I think in a way it could be sort of fairly asked, why devote 4,000 square feet to talk about the making of a film that was made over 50 years ago? But I think you all know the answer to that. If you're here tonight, then you are the super fans. You are the fans or the super fans. And I think part of the answer, there are many answers to that question, I feel, that why continue to sort of look at this film and examine it and ask questions of it and ourselves and the meaning of life and all of that. I think that part of it has to do with the relationship that audiences have to the film and the space that the film offers to the audience for interpretation. So there's many levels to that, but I think that in a way, the fact that we are all still so committed to being interested in the story that the film tells, and also the sort of magical effects that still look so mysterious. I think that's the answer. So tonight is a very special night, as they say. Welcoming you all to the exhibition, to be able to see it for the first time and to see the film itself on our magnificent screen. And also to have the conversation that we're about to have, a brief conversation with some very, very special guests that we are delighted to welcome. And I will just, I know you all know who is here. There aren't any surprises, but I will introduce them, and then I will bring them all on at once. We have Katharina Kubrick here with us, Stanley and Christiane Kubrick's daughter. We have Keir, actor who played Dave Bowman in the film, and Dan Richter, who was Moonwatcher, the ape, and the choreographer of all the apes in the Dawn of Man sequence. So we will bring them onto the stage and get them to tell us various secrets. And let's welcome them onto the stage now. Just flip it up.
Oh, I can do that? On.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay, you can hear me too. Excellent. So what shall we talk about? Oh, this film that everyone here is about to see. I think the reaction to the film, right? I was just saying a moment ago that it is the sort of people's relationship to the film that helps sort of keep it so evergreen, right? The things that we keep wanting to know about it, our reactions to it. I guess I wonder, for all of you, there was a lot written about and talked about when the film first came out. There were some mixed reviews, there were some strong reactions. Arthur C. Clarke had tears running down his face. So I wonder if you can share your recollections of seeing the film for the first time, and then how it has kind of, your response to the film has evolved over time. Katharina, we can start with you.
Yeah, I'm just going to, there are two sort of contrasting things. This is a direct quote from Stanley. If 2001 has stirred your emotions, your subconscious, or your mythical yearnings, then it has succeeded. And yesterday at the exhibition, there was a letter, because a newfound letter written yesterday by somebody here, and it says, "Dear Stanley, thank you for creating a film that doesn't tell me what to think or how to feel. You control the production of this film, but I am in charge of what it means." And I think those two things are perfect together, and I think Stanley would have absolutely loved that reaction, because that is why 51 years later we are still talking about and discussing this film.
As a 14-year-old, as a teenager of the film director, when you saw the film for the first time, what was your impression?
14. So we were at the Lowe's Cinema in 1968, myself and my two sisters and my mum and my dad, and we were all terribly excited, and the audience was full of executives and their wives and rent-a-crowd. And the three of us were sitting in the front row, and we were now getting to see what, Daddy's been doing for the last 4 years. And we visited the set, and we walked on the centrifuge, and we played with chimpanzees, and we got to go in the art department, and, film director kids stuff. And we were sitting in the front row, and it was 70mm, and we were just like, wow. And it was amazing, and there were people sitting behind me who did not know what was going on. Daddy was at the back of the audience with his clicker, watching people coming out, going, this is just saying, this is an absolute crock, I want my money back. But we didn't have a preconceived idea, because it was a journey that you go on, I think. And science fiction movies up until that point had been very much in the B category. Great Mass Experiment and The Blob and people in shiny metallic suits with pointy rocket ships. I mean, that's what science fiction movies were. And Stanley had said to Arthur C. Clarke, I want to make a really serious science fiction film, because, Russia and America were in the middle of this very intense space race. I mean, this was serious stuff. And they did it. And we still haven't achieved what they thought they were going to achieve. And we're now 19 years further on, and we're still not going around in spaceships and shuttles. We're so bored we don't even look out the window. We haven't achieved that. But, here we are.
Yeah.
So, guys.
So the two of you obviously were very involved in your particular scenes in the production, and I'm sure you at least had a sense of what the overall film was going to be. But seeing it for the first time, was it very different from your expectations?
Well, it blew me away when we had a script, but how do you show on a written page what we ultimately see in this film? It is such a visual symphony. And, it's like, how do you explain, other than hearing it, the Blue Danube? Is it about a river? No, it's not in this film, it isn't. And I'd just like to also mention, the first reaction to the film was, it blew me away. I thought it was an extraordinary experience. But never would I have guessed that 53 years later, we'd be in an auditorium like this, filled with people, sold out apparently. We would never have guessed, because those of you may not know that the initial reaction from the press, from the reviews, was not all so terrific. Some of it was, but like 50% or more were kind of negative. And MGM was very worried about it for a little while. And then within a month, there were lines around the block. And the makeup of those lines, I think there were the youth that were protesting the Vietnam War was about what it was. And anyway, I think MGM began to think that maybe it was because all these young people were smoking funny cigarettes. So they came out with a brand new poster. The brand new poster said 2001: A Space Odyssey, the ultimate trip.
So Dan, upon seeing the film, for the first time.
I wasn't in the States, so I wasn't at that horrendous opening, but I saw the opening in London, And my initial reaction was, oh my God, what a terrible job I did. The Donovan is a total failure. And his costumes look terrible, I look terrible, I should have done a better job, I should have worked harder. And I walked out very morose. But what I'm impressed with, I'm just looking out here, my vision isn't very good. And I just had cataract surgery like old people have. But how young these people are.
Yeah.
You know, this is not just a bunch of old farts here.
Yourself.
An evergreen film. So as we know, the first, like we've been talking about, the first days or weeks after the film was released was a dramatic time for Stanley Kubrick, maybe even a little traumatic. But Katharina, in the years that followed, can you say a little about the sort of role that the film played for him personally? Did he sort of give it? Did it have a particular resonance for him among all of the films that he made?
It was very popular. It did very well. I think it was one of the highest grossing films in 1968. I didn't know that for sure because I had to look it up. But once his films were finished, and then he would move on and on to the next project. He was very proud of his babies, and he had people looking after them, and always was very meticulous that wherever his films were screened, that the projector bulb was bright enough, that the sound was good, because he and his team had put an enormous amount of effort into making this film, so he wanted you, the audience, to see it in its optimum condition.
Well, it's really interesting because the film was, it continued to show in theaters for, in some places, up to 2 years. I mean, it was sort of most common that it was playing around for pretty much up to a year in a lot of big cities. So it kind of, it's not like today where something comes out and then it goes away really quickly. It sort of had this presence for a very long time, even on its first release.
Okay, now I would say this, wouldn't I? But Stanley's films are not popcorn movies. You know, a lot of films you go and you've forgotten them by the time you got to the car park. And his films last, and they're film art. They're like paintings. They're like symphonies. They're things that you can revisit and get things from over and over again, because he did his homework and he didn't spoon feed you. He didn't tell you what to think. And I said to him, people are so confused, and I said, well, look, if you put a foolscap piece of closely typed information next to the Mona Lisa telling you why she's smiling, you're going to take away all your fantasy, all your imagination. And the reason that people love this film is because who you are is how you interpret it, like this letter I read just now. I can't tell you what my interpretation is, because actually every time I see it, it changes. And how I think about it now is completely different to how I thought about it when I was 20 or indeed 14 when I originally saw it. You grow, and the films allow you to grow and to develop because they have their place in history, but they're not dusty. They don't. It's like some films, you haven't aged well, and you think, oh God, it's of its time. I don't think you can say that of 2001. I think it's of all time, because we haven't even got to where they thought we were going to be.
So he, your father was a fairly private person. He wasn't someone that really liked to sort of be in the limelight, and wasn't a lot of sort of interaction with the press on a regular basis. But the sort of cult around this film started fairly early on. A lot of attention, not just from critics, but from fans, like people really, really connecting with it and really feeling a sense of personal relationship to it. I wonder if he had any direct contact with the sort of super fan base that started to emerge around the film. Was he aware of it, do you know? And was it something that excited him, or was it just kind of not really in his orbit?
He got a lot of letters, a lot of fan letters. and a lot of people saying, you know, I'm bored to death, I want my money back, here are my ticket stubs. So we got a lot of those, we had boxes and boxes of those as well. And he kept all the reviews, the good ones, the bad ones. But then he would get lots of people's letters who would be 5, 6, 7, 10 pages long of their theory. You would get students writing their university thesis on the significance of this film. It was shown at the Vatican, and he was thrilled. He was thrilled that it made people think. That's what he wanted them to do, because he wasn't giving you answers. It was his and Arthur C. Clarke's bow to the unknowable. We're never going to know. I mean, if our planet, if we succeed in blowing it up, it isn't going to make any difference to the universe whatsoever. We are completely insignificant. And he knew that. And so it was just his hopeful, rather romantic and spiritual, you know, maybe it's like this, maybe we'll get to do this, maybe there are aliens out there, maybe we're not worthy, maybe we'll be reborn, or maybe we're just hopeless and doomed to our own stupidity.
So we, I think it's clear from the material in the exhibition and the stories that have been told about the film that it was very much Stanley Kubrick's film. But on the other hand, there are a lot of stories about the experimentation that he wanted to engage in with his actors, and certainly with the people involved in shooting the film. There was just a lot of, let's see what we can come up with. And Dan, earlier in your conversation in the gallery with some of our guests, you were talking about how Kubrick sort of engaged you to sort of be free with your imagination as he was, you know, directing you, that there was a big sort of role for you, for your own creativity in that. And I wondered here in how you were directed to play Dave Bowman, you know, what was that directing process like, and how much were you engaged to sort of bring some of your own to that?
Well, I arrived some weeks before principal photography for costume fittings and makeup fittings and studying one. Anyway, but also Gary Lockwood and myself spent a lot of time with Stanley discussing our characters, the fact that there would be a process of elimination where they were trying to figure out various candidates would be the best candidates for being astronauts, and that their psychological profile would indicate that the kind of person they were it would take something unbelievable for them to kind of lose their cool. So that an event that would cause you and I to run screaming out the door might just raise an eyebrow with them. So there isn't a lot of emotion showing these characters, and very little dialogue. Little dialogue because they've been in space for months. They've talked about everything that they can talk about. And the routine is exactly the same, day in, day out. And it's only when Hal goes nuts that we begin to see some emotion on these characters. And it took, the kind of education they had. So that was, a lot of the discussion went on for weeks before the first day of principal photography.
So were you asked to sort of tone your emotions down? Can you give us like a specific example of sort of a moment on the set where you were doing a reading and, just sort of paint a picture of you and Stanley sort of in the process of filming?
Well, I think, again, because of the preparation that we made, it was on a very kind of even keel. It wasn't, I might share something, I'll show off a little bit.
Yeah, yes, please do. This is your audience.
There was a scene that was shot that Stanley later cut from the film when he was editing it because he felt it was redundant. It was a scene I had where I spoke with Mission Control. And there was another scene when Mission Control spoke with us and he felt he just didn't need it. It was just when I was indicating there was a problem that the computer indicated was going to go, there was a problem on the ship that was going to go wrong. That was the communication. But it was very difficult to memorize because it was technological gobbledygook. Very difficult, like a foreign language. It stayed with me for these 53 years. And I'll give you a sample. Mission Control, this is X-ray Delta 1. At 1920 onboard fault prediction center, 99000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit as possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator, also confirm your approval of plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit prior to failure. Mission Control, this is X-ray Delta 1. Transmission concluded. I also have to say that the script was so brilliant. We didn't have to improve a lot on anything. I mean, all you had to do was kind of trust this extraordinary director that we were working with. I mean, you just knew you were in the presence of a genius when you were working with this man. But he was very easy to work with. I mean, he never raised his voice. He was open to suggestions. It didn't mean they would end up in the film, but you never felt you were stepping on his toes. He never made you feel that you were. I loved working with him. Didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine working with a more wonderful person. You know, because the thing is that Stanley encouraged you to do things, to have ideas. He didn't, we did 8 months of preparation for The Dawn of Man. We had worked out everything down to the smallest detail. But once the camera started turning, Stanley was wide open to whatever might happen. One little chance event, like when I picked up the bone, and first time a bone flipped up in the air, and I thought it was a mistake. So I said, we could talk, because I had the mask on and there was no sound. I said, I'm sorry, Stanley. He said, no, it's good. Keep it, do it again. And that ended up, we worked on that for weeks, and even over a month, until finally it was the bone going in the air, that wonderful cut, which is, it all happened from what was a mistake, a little chance thing that had happened.
He also used to say there's no such thing as a bad idea, and he did encourage his actors, I think, on every film. He cast well, didn't he, Keir? And he did cast extremely well, but he was also very inclusive. And famously, the script that was, the original script would be altered as the actors and as what happened on the set gave him new ideas. And he would be on the set writing new dialogue because something that the actor had done had sparked something in his imagination. He'd say, let's try this. And even if they filmed, say, the written dialogue that's in the script, they would shoot it, and he'd say to the actors, okay, now let's see what we can do differently. And he let the actors quite free form and quite ad-libbing, because it's a team effort. You cannot make a film by yourself, and the crew and the actors have to trust you. You're the leader, the buck stops with you, but you have to trust each other, and you're a team. And this is an art collaboration of talented people. So that's a terrible sentence.
Did you have access to the entire script during shooting, or were you only allowed to see the parts that you were in?
We had a whole script. Did you?
No. As a matter of fact, Stanley hired me almost on the spot, and I went over, they had a room for me, the doors said Dan Richter, Dawn of Man, and I went in, it was a big empty room with a desk and a phone. And I had no script, I had no instructions, I had pretty much no idea what to do, and it wasn't until Arthur Clarke knocked on the door and said, I suppose Stan hasn't given you any information, has he? I said, no. He said, would you like a script? I said, yeah, that would be great. And the process began from there. But there was the time when the monolith first appeared, and I went up to touch it. It was very dirty, everything was very dirty, and there was dust and everything, and there was dust on my hands because they had been on the thing. So I reached up, and I knew the camera, because of the position, I could actually not touch it, but look like I was touching it. So he said, touch it, because we were, again, talking all the time. I said, I don't want to make it dirty. He said, no, it's okay, touch it, Then he took me afterwards, he said, listen, there's a scene we shot already on the moon where, what's his name, goes and, the sun hits the monolith and he reaches up and touches it. So he's trying to match that shot.
Yeah.
And so then he told me a little bit more at that point.
And the rest of it was in the dark. Well, you know, it's interesting. We're going to see the film in a couple of minutes, but before we let everyone here see the film, I want to talk about some things that are not in the film. So my question for you, Dan, is about the ETs in the movie. So from what I understand, up until the very end of production, there was still this consideration of whether to show extraterrestrials as figural forms, right? During the Stargate sequence, where we're going to see any aliens, right? How do you do that? And your mother was engaged in trying to help, you know, define what these look like, and she made sketches and drawings, and these various ideas were hatched. These sculptures, these Giacometti-inspired sculptures that were made, and there's a picture upstairs. If you missed it, you'll have to come back and see it. In this sort of skin-tight white suit with reflective dots. Do you want to tell us a little bit
well,
about
the
that?
idea was that Stanley was working with me for months, actually, right up till we finished on trying to create an alien. And at one point, he had the idea, well, we'll paint you white, and then we'll cover you with black dots, and then we'll shoot you on a white background that's covered with black dots, and we'll shoot it in high contrast film, which is either black or white, and we can reverse that, and those dots will be points of light. And so when you're not moving, you won't see anything, but when you move, these lights will start moving, and the creature will. It didn't work, but
Did you see that footage?
Oh yes, and but the thing was, it took hours because they took one of those punches that makes little holes in the paper, and Stuart and his people, Stuart Freeborn, the makeup genius, they first painted me white, and they took all these little spots and spent hours putting them on my body, but it never worked. But we tried a number of experiments that way.
So you won't see that in the film.
But the picture is upstairs.
Yeah, there's a picture of it upstairs. I couldn't resist.
I think it's a good thing there weren't any aliens, actually, because it's much more mysterious. So there was a time when my mother and one of the other artists' wives, one of the art department, were in my mother's studio, and they were making clay aliens, which then went to the studio, which were then cast in latex, so they could move and be floppy, and then they were painted weird colours. And I think they very quickly decided that these things were really sort of, art school rubbish, and you couldn't have it in a movie. But then we had these enormous, great sort of multi-limbed, strange things crossed between a fish and an insect, sort of dangling around, which were then relegated to the back of the garden. It's just going to scare the shit out of people when they walk into the garden. What is that? So, but it's a really good thing that it wasn't in the movie.
So,
Yeah, what's not there is much more powerful.
Exactly. And speaking of what's not there, there was about 19 minutes or so cut from the film after it premiered, and I wonder if either of you, or perhaps you, Katharina, have any ideas about what audiences today are not going to see, some of the cut films.
I don't think there's anything critical that was cut. I mean, for example, one example I've already given, which is a speech to Mission Control, but I don't think it was, I can't remember anything that I was involved in that oh God, he let that go, he went. I really don't. I think maybe it was the tail end of things, maybe some of the shots when we're in space. And it took a long time sometimes for us to travel from one end of the ship to the other. And maybe, I don't know.
It was pacing stuff, because
Pacing
my thing, where the second time I come in and crack the guy in the head and kill him, he cut the master shot out there of the entry, and actually cut to the middle of it, the medium shots of me swinging the boat around and barking at the other guy.
Much scarier.
Yeah, he just paced up the pace a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing I might amuse the audience is that Stanley hadn't decided who should do the voice of Hal. Mm-hmm. And he tested a number of, in certain cases, well-known actors, and none of them pleased him enough to choose them. So he just turned to his assistant director, Derek Cracknell, and said, well, you do the voice. This film was made in England, so the crew was basically British. So Derek, you do the voice for Hal. So this is the voice for us of Hal. No, I can't do it. It's all like this, you know. Oh yeah, you know. For acting. But I just want to give credit to the man who did do the voice, who I think was brilliant, and I think Stanley learned about it through a documentary that the
He
Canadian
was a
Film
narrator
Board
for the film. He was a narrator of a film universe made by
Yes.
the National Film Board.
Right, and his name, oh God, his name's going out of my
Douglas Rain.
Douglas
Douglas
Rains.
Rains. Douglas Rains was not known in this country, but he was the Laurence Olivier of Canada. He did all the major Shakespearean leads at the Shakespeare Festival in Ontario
But
for
this,
many,
is,
many
but this
years.
is when he was. This is the film he became sort of known for indelibly, probably, right? Yeah.
Is there anybody here who hasn't seen this film?
There's one guy, oh, two, maybe three, four. It's okay. Okay.
Wow.
Well, you're in for a treat. And I think we might leave it.
So I just want to tell you, this film was made from 1964 to 1968. There was no such thing as CGI. This is a handmade movie. This was models and paintings, and everything was built. And just let it happen to you, okay?